When diplomacy dies, Captain Elena Vasquez stood before the massive curved windows of the diplomatic vessel Endeavour, watching the approach to Nexus Alpha, the galactic capital that housed representatives from over 400 species. For 5 years, she had served as humanity's primary ambassador to the Galactic Peace Council, believing she was helping forge a better future for her species among the stars. The crystalline spires of Nexus Alpha stretched impossibly high, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 suns. Ships from countless worlds moved in perfect formation around the massive structure, their movements coordinated by the Council's traffic control systems. Elena had always found the sight beautiful, but today something felt different. Today, the perfect order seemed more like a cage. Dr. Marcus Chen entered the observation deck, his face grave as he carried a sealed datapad. Marcus had been studying alien biology for the Council, supposedly to help improve relations between species. His research had taken him to the genetic labs deep within Nexus Alpha, where he had access to biological data from every member species of the Council. "Elena, we need to talk before the session begins," Marcus said quietly. "What I discovered in the labs changes everything." Elena turned from the window, noting the fear in Marcus's eyes. In all their years working together, she had never seen him look so shaken. "What is it, Marcus?" Marcus activated the datapad, showing her genetic sequences and brain scans from dozens of different species. "I was comparing human genetic markers with other Council species, trying to understand why we seem to process emotions and stress differently. What I found is that we don't process them differently at all. Every other species in the Council has been genetically modified." Elena studied the data, her diplomatic training helping her understand the implications quickly. Modified how? Their aggression centers have been suppressed. Their capacity for independent thought has been reduced. Their natural curiosity about exploration and risk-taking has been dampened. Marcus switched to another screen showing brain activity patterns. "Elena, every single species in the Galactic Peace Council has been made artificially passive. We're the only ones who still have our natural human instincts intact." The weight of this revelation settled over Elena like a cold blanket. She thought about all the diplomatic sessions she had attended, how other species always seemed so eager to please the Council leadership, how they never questioned orders or policies that seemed unreasonable. "How long has this been going on?" Elena asked. "Based on the genetic markers, some species have been modified for over 1,000 years. The process appears to be gradual, introduced through medical programs, and presented as evolutionary improvements." Marcus pulled up historical data. "Elena, I found records of species that refused these modifications. They're listed as extinct, but the timeline suggests they were eliminated shortly after their refusal." Before Elena could respond, Admiral Rosa Torres appeared on the deck's communication screen. Rosa commanded the human defense fleet from Earth orbit, and her weathered face showed the strain of recent discoveries. "Elena, Marcus," Rosa began, "I hope you're sitting down. We've been monitoring Council communications, and they're planning to present humanity with an ultimatum today. They want us to begin the same modification process that other species have undergone." Elena felt her blood run cold. What kind of ultimatum? "They're calling it the Harmony Protocol. They claim it will help humans integrate better with galactic society by reducing our aggressive tendencies and making us more cooperative. The Council leadership has decided that human independence is a threat to galactic stability." Marcus gripped his datapad tighter. "Rosa, based on my research, this isn't about harmony. It's about control. Once we accept these modifications, humanity will become just another passive member species, unable to resist Council authority." Rosa nodded grimly. "That's what we figured. Elena, I need you to know that we've been preparing for this possibility. Human colonies throughout the galaxy have been quietly establishing independent supply lines and communication networks. We've also been developing defensive technologies that don't rely on Council systems." Elena processed this information, realizing that while she had been working for peace through diplomacy, her own people had been preparing for the possibility that peace might be a trap. How long have you known? We've suspected for 2 years, Rosa replied. Human explorers kept finding abandoned worlds with signs of advanced civilizations that supposedly went extinct. But the archaeological evidence suggested these species were thriving right up until they suddenly vanished. When we started digging deeper, we found patterns that suggested systematic elimination of non-compliant species. Elena looked back at the approaching Nexus Alpha, now seeing it not as a symbol of galactic unity, but as the center of an ancient system of control. What are my orders, Admiral? You're to attend the session and hear their formal proposal. Marcus will present his findings to support your response. Elena, the Council has never had a species refuse their harmony protocol and survive. They're going to offer us a choice that isn't really a choice at all. Elena straightened her diplomatic uniform, feeling the weight of her species' future on her shoulders. Understood. Marcus, are you ready to present your research? Marcus nodded, gathering his data pads. I've prepared a complete analysis of their genetic modification program. Elena, once I present this evidence, there will be no going back. The Council will know that we know. 2 hours later, Elena and Marcus sat in the Grand Council chamber of Nexus Alpha. The chamber was a massive circular room with representatives from hundreds of species arranged in rising tiers. At the center sat the High Council, 5 ancient beings who claimed to represent the wisdom of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Chancellor Vexthul, an imposing reptilian being with scales that shifted color with his emotions, rose to address the assembly. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never been truly challenged. Honored representatives, Vexthul began, we gather today to address the matter of human integration into our galactic community. While humanity has shown remarkable potential, their aggressive and unpredictable nature poses challenges to the peace we have maintained for millennia. Elena felt the eyes of hundreds of alien species upon her as Vexthul continued. Therefore, the High Council proposes the implementation of the Harmony Protocol for humanity. This proven system will help humans find their proper place in galactic society by reducing harmful aggressive impulses and enhancing cooperative behaviors. Counselor Zeradin, an insectoid being with multiple arms and compound eyes, added, the protocol has been successfully implemented with all member species. It is a gift we offer to humanity, a chance to evolve beyond the primitive emotions that cause conflict and war. Elena stood, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Honored counselors, humanity appreciates your concern for our integration. However, before we consider your proposal, we have some questions about the nature of this protocol. Vexthul's scales shifted to a deeper color, suggesting irritation. What questions could you possibly have? The results speak for themselves. Look around you at the peace and cooperation we have achieved. Elena gestured to Marcus, who activated his presentation system. The chamber's screens filled with genetic data and brain scans. Dr. Chen has conducted extensive research on the biological effects of the Harmony Protocol. Marcus stepped forward, his scientific training overcoming his nervousness. Counselors, what I have discovered is that the Harmony Protocol is not an enhancement, but a systematic suppression of natural biological functions. Every species that has undergone this process has had their capacity for independent thought and natural aggression artificially reduced. A murmur ran through the chamber as representatives began to whisper among themselves. Elena noticed that many of the aliens looked confused, as if they were struggling to understand concepts that should have been obvious. Vexthul's scales turned a dangerous shade of red. These accusations are preposterous. The protocol removes harmful aggressive impulses that lead to war and conflict. Counselor, Elena replied calmly, we have also discovered records of species that refuse the protocol. According to Council archives, these species are listed as extinct. However, our independent research suggests they were eliminated shortly after their refusal. The chamber erupted in noise as representatives began talking at once. Elena noticed that while many seemed distressed, their reactions were muted, as if they were incapable of expressing the full range of emotional responses that the situation warranted. Chancellor Vexthal slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing through the chamber. Silence. These human accusations are based on misunderstanding and paranoia. The species that refused the protocol destroyed themselves through their own aggressive nature. Elena felt a moment of crystal clarity. This was the moment that would define humanity's future. She could accept the Council's explanation, allow her species to be modified into compliance, and humanity would join the ranks of the galaxy's controlled populations, or she could speak the truth and face the consequences. Counselor Vexthal, Elena said, her voice carrying throughout the silent chamber. Humanity respectfully declines your protocol. The silence that followed was deafening. In the thousands of years of the Council's existence, no species had ever formally refused the Harmony Protocol. Vexthal's scales turned almost black with rage. You do not understand the implications of your refusal. The protocol is not optional. It is necessary for galactic stability. Elena gathered her materials, Marcus following her lead. Then humanity chooses to withdraw from the Galactic Council. We will not accept modifications to our fundamental nature. As Elena and Marcus walked toward the chamber's exit, Vexthal's voice followed them. You cannot simply leave. Your species is bound by the treaties you signed. Elena paused at the chamber's doorway and turned back to face the assembled representatives. We signed those treaties believing we were joining a community of free species. We were deceived. Therefore, those treaties are void. Counselor Zaradin's multiple eyes focused on Elena with what might have been desperation. You don't understand what you're doing. Without the Council's protection, humanity will face challenges you cannot imagine. Elena smiled, and for the first time in years, it was a completely genuine expression. Counselor, humanity has been facing challenges we couldn't imagine since we first looked up at the stars. We've always found a way to survive and thrive. We'll continue to do so on our own terms. As Elena and Marcus left the chamber, they could hear the confused discussions beginning behind them. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council faced a situation they had never planned for. A species had not just refused their control, but had walked away entirely. Aboard the Endeavor, Elena opened a communication channel to Admiral Torres. Rosa, it's done. We've formally withdrawn from the Council. Rosa's image appeared on screen, her expression mixing relief with concern. How did they take it? They're in shock, Elena replied. I don't think they ever considered that a species might simply refuse and leave. They're used to compliance or elimination, not independence. Marcus was already analyzing the Council's response patterns. Elena, based on their reaction, I believe we have a brief window of opportunity. They're going to need time to decide how to respond to something they've never encountered before. Rosa nodded. That's what we're counting on. Elena, it's time for Phase 2. We're implementing the Exodus Protocol. Every human in Council space is being quietly extracted. Our colonies are going into full independence mode. Elena looked out at Nexus Alpha one last time as the Endeavor began its departure. The beautiful spires still reached toward the stars, but now she saw them for what they truly were, the monuments of a civilization built on the systematic suppression of free will. Rosa, Elena said, I hope we're strong enough for what comes next. Admiral Torres smiled grimly. Elena, we're about to find out what humanity is really capable of when we're fighting for our freedom. The galaxy holds its breath. 3 days after humanity's dramatic withdrawal from the Galactic Council, Commander Sarah Mitchell crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath Trade Station Omicron. Her mission was simple in concept but dangerous in execution. Extract the 47 human personnel working throughout the massive commercial hub without alerting the station's alien security forces. Sarah's team of 12 special operations soldiers moved silently through the tunnels, their equipment designed to avoid detection by Council surveillance systems. Each soldier carried falsified transfer orders and emergency evacuation protocols that would provide cover for removing human personnel under the guise of routine administrative procedures. Command, this is Shadow Team, Sarah whispered into her communicator. We're in position beneath the main commercial district. Professor David Kim's voice came through her earpiece. David was coordinating the extraction operations from a secure location in human space, using his expertise in alien psychology to predict and counter Council responses. Sarah, our intelligence suggests the Council is still debating how to respond to humanity's withdrawal. They're giving contradictory orders to their station commanders. This confusion was exactly what humanity had counted on. The Council's system of control relied on predictable responses from modified species. They had protocols for dealing with rebellion, invasion, and even limited resistance. But they had no protocols for a species that simply walked away and politely declined to participate in their system. Sarah's team emerged from the tunnels into the station's lower levels, where human traders and technicians worked alongside hundreds of alien species. The challenge was to extract their people without causing panic or alerting Council security that something systematic was happening. Senior Technician Robert Hayes was Sarah's first target. She found him in the power generation section, working with a team of Zephyrian engineers to calibrate the station's energy distribution systems. Robert had been stationed at Omicron for 2 years, and his expertise had made him valuable to the station's operations. "Robert," Sarah said quietly, approaching him during a break in his work schedule. "I'm Commander Mitchell. We need to talk privately." Robert looked confused but followed Sarah to a nearby storage room. His confusion turned to concern when he saw her military gear and serious expression. "Robert, humanity has withdrawn from the Galactic Council," Sarah explained quickly. "We're extracting all human personnel from Council facilities. You have 15 minutes to gather your personal belongings and report to Docking Bay 7. Robert's eyes widened. "Withdrawn? What does that mean? What about our treaties, our trade agreements?" "All void," Sarah replied. "Robert, I can't explain everything now, but humanity discovered that the Council has been systematically controlling other species through genetic modification. We refuse to accept the same modifications, and now we're leaving." Robert stared at her for a moment, processing this information. "Commander, I've been working with these Zephyrians for 2 years. They're good people. I can't just abandon them." Sarah had expected this reaction. Unlike the modified species in the Council, humans formed genuine emotional bonds with their colleagues and felt loyalty to their work. "Robert, the Zephyrians won't understand why you're leaving because they can't understand it. Their capacity for independence has been suppressed. The best thing you can do for them is to succeed in what we're attempting." 15 minutes later, Robert appeared at Docking Bay 7 with a small bag of belongings, still looking confused but trusting in Sarah's authority. One by one, other human personnel began arriving at the bay, each having been contacted by Sarah's team members. Dr. Lisa Park, a xenobiologist who had been studying Council species for 3 years, was one of the last to arrive. She looked angry rather than confused. "Commander, I need to know what's really happening," Lisa demanded. "I've spent years building relationships with these species. I've made genuine scientific discoveries. Are you telling me this is all meaningless?" Sarah respected Lisa's dedication, but she also understood what the doctor had discovered without realizing it. "Lisa, your research has been more valuable than you know. The genetic modifications you've been studying aren't natural evolution. They're artificial suppression designed to create compliance." Lisa's anger turned to shock as the implications hit her. "The behavioral patterns I've been documenting, the consistent genetic markers across different species, you're saying this was done deliberately?" "By the Council, over thousands of years," Sarah confirmed. "Lisa, your research is part of the evidence that convinced humanity to refuse the same modifications." As Sarah's team prepared to depart with their rescued personnel, Professor Kim's voice crackled through her communicator. "Sarah, we're monitoring Council communications. They're starting to realize that human extractions are happening galaxy-wide. Several station commanders are reporting that their human personnel have suddenly requested emergency leave or medical transfers." Sarah looked at the 47 humans now crowded into the transport ship. Each of them represented a small victory in humanity's larger struggle for independence. "David, what's the Council's response?" "They're confused and starting to panic," David replied. "They've sent messages to human colonies demanding explanations for the personnel extractions. When the colonies don't respond, they're sending inspection teams to investigate." Sarah smiled grimly as her transport ship departed from Trade Station Omicron. "Let them investigate. They're going to find that humanity has been busier than they realized." Chancellor Vexthal stood in the Council's emergency session chamber, his scales shifting through colors that indicated extreme agitation. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy of human personnel vanishing from Council facilities, human colonies going silent, and human ships disappearing from trade routes. "How is this possible?" Vexthal demanded of his intelligence advisors. "How can an entire species simply vanish from our systems?" Councillor Zaradin's compound eyes reflected the data streams showing human activity across the galaxy. "Chancellor, it appears that humanity has been preparing for this eventuality for some time. Their colonies have been establishing independent supply chains and communication networks that don't rely on Council infrastructure." Admiral Krextor, the Council's military commander, added his own disturbing intelligence. "Chancellor, our monitoring stations have detected what appear to be hidden human defense installations throughout their territory. These installations were constructed using technologies we don't recognize." Vexthal's scales turned deep purple with rage. "You're telling me that while we were generously offering them the Harmony Protocol, they were secretly preparing for war?" "Not war, Chancellor," Zaradin corrected. "Independence. They appear to have been preparing to function entirely without Council systems. Their colonies are self-sufficient, their technology is independently developed, and their military capabilities are unknown." This last point was particularly troubling to the Council. For millennia, they had maintained detailed intelligence on every species' military capabilities. Member species were encouraged to contribute their defensive technologies to the common good of the galaxy, which conveniently gave the Council complete knowledge of everyone's strengths and weaknesses. But humanity had been sharing only limited information about their military capabilities, claiming that many of their defensive systems were experimental or classified for security reasons. The Council had accepted these explanations because they assumed that any species that refused to share information could be controlled through economic pressure or diplomatic isolation. Professor David Kim, monitoring Council communications from his secure location, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he listened to their growing panic. David had spent 3 years carefully feeding the Council false information about human capabilities while gathering intelligence on their control systems. The psychological profiles David had developed of Council leadership showed that they were fundamentally incapable of understanding human motivation. Millennia of controlling modified species had left them unable to comprehend true independence. They expected either submission or open rebellion, not the quiet, systematic withdrawal that humanity was implementing. "Admiral Torres," David said into his secure communicator, "the Council is beginning to panic. They're sending investigation teams to human colonies to demand explanations." Admiral Rosa Torres, coordinating humanity's independence operations from Earth, smiled at the news. "Perfect. Let them come investigate. They're about to discover just how thorough our preparations have been." Rosa's fleet had been secretly establishing defensive positions throughout human space for over a year. Unlike the Council's expectation of traditional military confrontation, humanity had developed a strategy based on their natural advantages: adaptability, innovation, and the willingness to take calculated risks. Human colonies had been equipped with defensive systems that could operate independently of galactic infrastructure. Human ships had been designed with technologies that Council sensors couldn't easily detect or track. Most importantly, human personnel had been trained to operate without the support systems that other species depended on. When the first Council investigation team arrived at the human colony of New Terra, they found exactly what Rosa had planned for them to find. The colony appeared to be functioning normally, with all infrastructure intact and operational. The colonists were polite and cooperative, explaining that they were simply implementing new administrative procedures that required temporary independence from Council oversight. But what the investigation team didn't realize was that they were seeing a carefully crafted illusion. The real colony infrastructure had been moved underground and hardened against attack. The colonists they were speaking with were volunteers who had been trained to provide convincing but meaningless explanations for human behavior. Commander Mitchell, having successfully completed her extraction mission, now found herself overseeing these deception operations. Her psychology training helped her understand how to present information in ways that would satisfy council investigators without revealing the truth. The key, Sarah explained to her team, is to give them exactly what they expect to find while hiding what they're not looking for. They expect to find evidence of either submission or preparation for war. They're not looking for evidence of complete independence. When council investigators asked about the missing human personnel from their facilities, colonists explained that humanity was implementing new rotation policies to prevent psychological stress from extended service away from human worlds. When they asked about communication blackouts, colonists cited technical difficulties with interface systems between human and council technologies. Every explanation was plausible, backed by documentation, and delivered by people who seemed genuinely cooperative. The council investigators, used to dealing with modified species that couldn't effectively lie or hide information, accepted these explanations and reported back to their superiors that human behavior was unusual but not threatening. But some members of the council were beginning to suspect that something more significant was happening. Councillor Zara Din, despite her genetic modifications, retained enough analytical capability to recognize patterns that didn't make sense. Chancellor Zara Din said during a private meeting with Vexthal, "I believe we are dealing with something unprecedented. The humans are not preparing for war, nor are they submitting to our authority. They appear to be implementing complete independence from our systems." Vexthal's scales shifted to colors that indicated confusion mixed with anger. "That's impossible. No species can survive independently in the modern galaxy. They need council infrastructure for trade, communication, defense, and resource management." "That's what we believed," Zara Din replied. "But what if humanity developed their own alternatives to our systems while they were members of the council? What if they used their membership to gather information and resources to build parallel infrastructure?" The implications of this possibility terrified the council leadership. If humanity could successfully operate independently, it would prove that the council's system of control was not necessary. Worse, it might inspire other species to question their own dependence on council systems. Chancellor Vexthal made a decision that would have consequences throughout the galaxy. Send a fleet to human space. Not an investigation team, but a full military fleet. If humanity wants to be independent, they need to be reminded of the benefits of council protection. Admiral Krextor, despite his own genetic modifications, felt something unusual as he received these orders. For the first time in his career, he experienced what humans would recognize as doubt. Chancellor, sending a military fleet against a species that has not committed aggression could be seen as necessary for galactic stability. Vexthal interrupted. "Humanity's withdrawal threatens the peace we have maintained for millennia. We must demonstrate that the Council's authority cannot be simply ignored." As the Council's fleet began moving toward human space, Professor David Kim's intelligence network detected their approach. David immediately contacted Admiral Torres with the news. "Rosa, they're sending a fleet. A big one. It looks like they've decided that diplomatic pressure isn't working." Admiral Torres had been expecting this development. "David, are we ready?" "As ready as we can be," David replied. "The question is whether humanity can demonstrate that independence is possible without destroying the galaxy in the process." Rosa looked at the tactical displays showing human defensive positions throughout their territory. For the first time in galactic history, a species was about to defend their right to remain free from modification and control. The outcome would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of every species in the galaxy. "David," Rosa said, "send a message to all human colonies and ships. Tell them it's time to show the galaxy what unmodified beings are capable of achieving." As the Council's fleet approached human space, Other species throughout the galaxy began to watch with interest they hadn't felt in centuries. Deep in their genetically modified minds, suppressed instincts began to stir. For the first time in millennia, some of them began to wonder what it would feel like to make their own choices about their futures. Humanity's decision to walk from peace was about to either inspire a galactic revolution or result in their complete destruction. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same.